With all due respect, Captain, this is the Apex Predator course. We fly fighters, not fairy librarians. Are you sure you're in the right briefing room? The words, spoken by Colonel Madsen, sliced through the sterile, conditioned air of the briefing chamber with the subtlety of a bullhorn. The crowd laughed. It was a low, nervous chuckle that rippled through the rows of pilots, a sound of complicity from men clad in flight suits adorned with the patches of elite squadrons. They were the best of the best, or so they believed, and their collective gaze fell upon the woman standing alone near the front. She was an anomaly in this room of sculpted jawlines and confident swagger. Captain Eva Rostova did not look up. Her attention remained fixed on the tactical tablet in her hands, her fingers swiping through pre-flight data with a calm, methodical rhythm. She offered no retort, no flinch, no acknowledgement that the insult had even registered. Her silence was a vacuum in the loud room, a void that Madsen's arrogance rushed to fill. He was a man carved from institutional certainty, his chest a billboard of past glories, and his voice a tool for reinforcing the established order. To him, Rostova was a clerical error, diversity initiative checkbox that had wandered into a sanctuary of warriors. Her slight build, the intellectual intensity in her eyes when she did look up, and her complete lack of performative aggression were, in his mind, disqualifying deficiencies. But in the back of the room, unseen by Madsen, General Thorne saw something else entirely. He wasn't looking at her face, he was looking at her hands. He saw the worn leather of her flight gloves placed neatly beside her tablet, the seams frayed not from age, but from friction. He recognized the specific wear pattern along the thumb and forefinger, a patina of distress that only came from thousands of hours gripping a control stick under immense, crushing G-force, a testament to a life spent on the violent edge of aerospace engineering. The general, a man who had forgotten more about aerial combat than Madsen would ever know, saw not a librarian, but a paradox. He saw a stillness that was not born of fear, but of profound, unshakable confidence. He recognized the quiet of a professional who had been tested in crucibles Madsen couldn't even imagine, and who had long ago stopped needing the approval of lesser men. The room saw a question mark. General Thorne saw the answer. If you believe competence is measured in action, not opinion, type prove it below. The colonel, emboldened by the sycophantic laughter and Rostova's continued silence, pressed his advantage, mistaking her composure for weakness. He strode to the front of the room, his boots echoing on the polished concrete, and gestured grandly to the main holographic display which showed the tactical layout for the day's simulation. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his eyes locking onto Rostova. Today's scenario is designated Iron Gauntlet. It's not a training exercise. It's a meat grinder. We're simulating a pure state conflict over the South China Sea. You'll be outnumbered 5-1. The enemy will be flying Su-57s with advanced electronic warfare capabilities. They won't be on your radar until they're launching on you. The weather will be a typhoon. The ceiling will be non-existent. Your mission is to escort a high-value asset out of the combat zone while degrading enemy air superiority. Most of you will fail. Many of you, digitally speaking, will not come home. His speech was a familiar brew of intimidation and inspiration, designed to forge the pilots into a cohesive, aggressive unit. But today it had a specific target. This is a test of instinct, aggression, and pure flying skill. It is no place for hesitation. It is no place for academics. He let that last word hang in the air, a final, poison dart aimed directly at the silent captain. He then began assigning roles, his voice booming with authority. Striker 1 and 2, you're on CAP. Wolfpack, you'll run sweep and clear a path. Daggerflight, you're on close escort. Then, with a cruel smile, he turned back to Rostova. And we have a special role for Captain Rostova. We'll give her the decoy position, F-35, but we're red flagging your primary avionics, your radar, and we're simulating a flameout in your port engine just after takeoff. Your job is simple. Captain, just try to stay alive for the first 5 minutes. Draw their fire. Give the real pilots a chance to do their work. The cruelty was breathtaking in its precision. It was an assignment designed for absolute public failure. A crippled jet in an impossible scenario. He was not testing her. He was staging her execution. The other pilots shifted uncomfortably. The pity in their eyes was now mixed with a palpable scorn. She was not just an outsider. She was being made into a liability, a sacrificial lamb whose failure would serve as a lesson. The isolation was now complete, a wall of prejudice built brick by the colonel. Through it all, Eva Rostova simply looked up from her tablet, her expression unreadable. She blinked once, a slow, deliberate motion, and then spoke for the first time, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the heavy tension. "Understood, Colonel, that was all. 2 words. No fear, no anger, just the calm acceptance of a professional receiving a task." It was a response so devoid of the expected emotion that it was more unsettling to Madsen than any argument would have been. He could feel for the first time a flicker of doubt, a tiny crack in his fortress of certainty. He dismissed it as he turned away, barking the final orders for the pilots to man their simulators. The pilots filed out, a river of green flight suits and bravado, flowing around the still island that was Captain Rostova. She remained for a moment, took a slow, deep breath, picked up her worn gloves, and walked towards her destiny, leaving a wake of silent, heavy judgment behind her. The transition from the starkly lit briefing room to the cool, dark cocoon of the simulator pod was a familiar one for Eva. For the other pilots, it was a gateway to a high-stakes game, a place of adrenaline and ego. For Eva, it was a laboratory. It was home. The boisterous shouts and backslapping of the other pilots faded as the heavy hatch of Simulator 7 hissed shut, sealing her in a world of pure data and physics. While they joked and boasted over the comms during their pre-flight checks, Eva's process was a silent ballet of practiced efficiency. Her hands, clad in the worn leather gloves, moved over the holographic controls with a liquid grace. There was no wasted motion, no hesitation. Each switch was flipped, each system checked, in a rhythmic sequence that was as ingrained as her own breathing. In the master control room, a massive chamber dominated by a wall of screens displaying every pilot's data, Colonel Madsen watched with a hawk's intensity, a smirk playing on his lips. He pointed to a small biocentric monitor in the corner of Eva's display. "Look at that," he said to a subordinate controller. "Heart rate is a flat 62 beats per minute. Blood pressure 115/75. She's probably frozen with fear." Catatonic, the young controller nodded, but his eyes told a different story. He saw not fear, but a state of calm so profound it was almost unnatural. It was the calm of a surgeon before a complex operation or a bomb disposal expert leaning over a live device. It was the calm of absolute focus. Inside the pod, Eva was oblivious to their analysis. She was deep in her process, her mind a quiet space of logic and calculation. The simulated engine was already sputtering. The primary radar display was a screen of digital snow. The electronic warfare panel was a Christmas tree of red warning lights. It was a flying coffin, just as Madsen had intended. But Eva saw something else. She saw a problem to be solved. She saw a set of variables to be manipulated. Her fingers danced across a secondary control panel, rerouting auxiliary power not to the failing systems, but to the flight control surfaces, boosting their responsiveness beyond standard limits. She was not trying to fix the broken plane. She was turning its weaknesses into weapons. All stations, simulation commencing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Execute. The voice from the control room was the starting gun. The blackness outside Eva's cockpit was replaced by a churning, hyper-realistic gray sky, a digital tempest of furious wind and rain. Her aircraft lurched, the simulated flame-out in the port engine sending it into an immediate, sickening yaw. On the main tactical display in the control room, her green icon, designated decoy, immediately began to fall behind the main formation, bleeding altitude and speed. "There she goes," Madsen muttered, leaning back in his chair, ready for the inevitable. "Let's see how long she lasts." But Eva wasn't just falling. She was positioning. The simulation began with an explosion of chaos. On the tactical plot, a swarm of red icons, the enemy fighters materialized from the storm, screaming towards the American formation. Alarms blared in a dozen simulator cockpits. The confident chatter of the Apex Predator pilots turned to strained, urgent calls. Bandits 30 miles hot. Multiple groups. Fox 3. Fox 3. I'm defensive. I've got a missile in the air. In the middle of this maelstrom, Eva's crippled F-35 was the slowest, most vulnerable target. Two enemy fighters immediately broke off, their vectors a straight line to intercept her. Decoy. 1. You have two bandits on your 6, closing fast, the control officer called out, a note of detached finality in his voice. Acknowledge. Eva's voice replied, still unervingly calm. What she did next defied every known rule of aerial combat, every chapter in every tactical manual. Instead of attempting a desperate, high-G turn or dumping flares, she did something insane. She cut power to her remaining good engine and deployed her air brakes. Her aircraft, already struggling, became a brick falling out of the sky. On the control room screen, her speed indicator plummeted catastrophically. The two enemy fighters, closing at over 1,000 miles per hour, overshot her in a fraction of a second, their advanced fire control systems unable to compensate for her sudden, drastic deceleration. As they blew past her, Eva executed the second part of her impossible maneuver. Using the last of her momentum, she kicked the rudder hard, forcing her stalling aircraft into a deliberate, violent flat spin. The world outside her cockpit became a nauseating, gray blur. The G-forces should have been overwhelming, the structural stress terminal. But Eva rode the spin, her hand on the stick not fighting it, but guiding it, using the gyroscopic forces of the spin itself as a new kind of sensor. In the control room, everyone stared, dumbfounded. What is she doing? Madsen breathed, his arrogance forgotten, replaced by sheer, unadulterated confusion. She's going to tear the airframe apart. But she wasn't. From within the disorienting chaos of the spin, using only the F-35's helmet-mounted display and her own eyes, she was now behind the two fighters that had overshot her. They were turning back, expecting to find a wreckage, not a threat. With her main radar out, she couldn't use her long-range missiles. So she used her heat seekers, weapons that required a close-range visual lock. A tone shrieked in her ear. She squeezed the trigger. Once. Twice. Two Sidewinder missiles leaped from their rails, not flying straight, but thrown outward by the centrifugal force of the spin, their own guidance systems fighting to correct their course. On the main display, two red icons vanished in a flash of digital light. A collective gasp went through the control room. She had just scored 2 kills from a stall, in a flat spin, with a crippled engine and no radar. It was not just improbable. It was impossible. But she wasn't done. She recovered from a spin just feet above the simulated waves of the churning sea, her jets screaming in protest. She then located the high-value asset, the escort for which was now scattered and fighting for its life. She didn't try to defend it. She flew directly underneath it, her own crippled jet acting as a physical shield against an incoming sea-skimming missile meant for the asset. Her aircraft was fatally wounded now, but she had saved the mission's primary objective. With her jet now truly a glider, a dead stick, she performed a flawless emergency landing on a simulated carrier deck that was pitching violently in the typhoon, a feat of airmanship that made the controllers, seasoned veterans themselves, shake their heads in disbelief. The simulation ended. On the final scoreboard, every other pilot was listed as MIA or Kia. Captain Eva Rostova was listed as RTB, return to base. Mission objective, accomplished. The silence that followed was not the quiet of a library. It was the profound, deafening silence of a cathedral after a miracle. It was a silence filled with the shattering of assumptions, the collapse of prejudice. Colonel Madsen stood frozen, his face a pale mask of shock. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He stared at the tactical replay, watching the ghost of Eva's green icon dance its impossible dance of death, a dance that had broken not just the enemy fighters, but his entire worldview. His mind couldn't process what it had just seen. It was a violation of the natural order of things, a refutation of every certainty he had built his career upon. The other controllers were equally stunned, their faces illuminated by the glow of the screens, their expressions a mixture of awe and fear. They had not just witnessed a successful simulation. They had witnessed the emergence of something new, something they had no name for. The silence was finally broken, not by an alarm or a voice, but by the slow, deliberate sound of leather-soled shoes on the polished floor. General Thorne emerged from the shadows at the back of the room, his face grim, his eyes holding a fire that Madsen had not seen in years. He walked past the rows of stunned controllers, his gaze fixed on the main screen, where the replay of Eva's flat spin maneuver was looping in slow motion. He watched it once, then twice, a slight, almost imperceptible nod of recognition on his face. He ignored the stammering Madsen, who was now trying to form a coherent sentence. "General, I don't understand. That's not a recognized tactical maneuver. It's reckless." Thorne didn't even turn to look at him. His focus was absolute. He walked to the master console, his presence radiating an authority that dwarfed the colonel's. He leaned towards the senior duty officer, his voice low but carrying the clear command of a man used to absolute obedience. "Pull up the service record for Captain Eva Rostova. Full clearance. My authority. Display it on the main screen. All of it. Unseal the Project Chimera Annex." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Project Chimera was a phantom, a whisper in the intelligence community, a black-budget program so secret that most people at the general's rank didn't even have clearance to know its name. The duty officer, a young lieutenant, fumbled with the keyboard, his hands trembling slightly. "Sir," he stammered, "doing that requires a two-factor authorization from the Pentagon. I can't." General Thorne reached into his pocket and produced a small, featureless black card. He slid it into a port on the console. Then he placed his thumb on a biometric scanner. The system chimed. The screen flashed green. "You can now," the general said, his voice flat and cold. Madsen took a step forward, his face a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "General, with all due respect, this is a highly irregular." He was cut off not by a word, but by the look in Thorne's eyes. It was a look that said, "You have done enough damage for one day. Be silent." Madsen froze, his words dying in his throat. The file appeared on the giant screen, and the entire room held its breath. The initial data was what they expected. Officer training school, top of her class, advanced degrees in aeronautical engineering and theoretical physics from MIT. It was the profile of an academic, a librarian, as Madsen had so mockingly called her. Then, under the general's direction, the lieutenant clicked on the sealed annex. The screen refreshed, and the room fell into a new, deeper level of stunned silence. The mundane data was replaced by a wall of text filled with heavily redacted project names and cryptic acronyms. Unit designation: 418th Special Operations Flight Test Squadron, the Phantoms. Call sign Ghost. Primary aircraft experience: YF 23A Black Widow 2, Advanced Systems Integration and Envelope Expansion Testing. Aurora Program Hypersonic Test Vehicle, Atmospheric Entry Dynamics and Control Surface Modeling. Tier 1 Special Operations Low Observable Insertion Craft, classified. Her flight hours weren't logged in combat patrols, but in high-risk test points and controlled departures from stable flight. She had more simulated dead-stick landings than every pilot in the Apex program combined at takeoffs. The reason was simple and horrifying. Her entire job was to take the most advanced, unstable, and secret aircraft on the planet and intentionally, methodically, break them in simulations to discover their absolute limits. The Iron Gauntlet scenario that Colonel Madsen had designed to be her public execution was, for her, a Tuesday morning warm-up. He had thrown her into a briar patch, not realizing she had been born and raised in it. General Thorne finally turned his attention away from the screen and faced the silent, awestruck room. His voice was not loud, but it filled every corner of the space with its immense, crushing weight. "Colonel Madsen," he began, his eyes locking onto the now trembling officer. "You are a graduate of the Air Force Academy. You have over 3,000 hours in an F-16. You are, by all conventional metrics, an excellent officer. But your arrogance has made you ignorant. And today, your ignorance made you a fool." He gestured to the screen. "You looked at Captain Rostova, and you saw a woman. You saw a scientist. You saw anything but the truth. What you should have seen is a national asset. You should have seen a pilot who has willingly subjected herself to flight profiles that would have turned you into a puddle of terrified jelly. The maneuver you called reckless is known in her unit as the Rostova Cascade, a defensive maneuver she personally designed to defeat advanced AI tracking systems by creating a chaotic, unpredictable flight path. She didn't break the rules of air combat. She wrote a new chapter, one you don't have the clearance to read. He let the words sink in, a public shaming so total and absolute that it was physically painful to witness. Then he walked over to the door of Simulator 7 just as Eva was stepping out, her helmet under her arm, her expression as placid as ever. In front of the entire command staff, in a gesture of respect so profound it was a physical blow to every ounce of prejudice in the room, General Thorne, a living legend of the Air Force, snapped to attention and rendered a slow, perfect salute. "Welcome to the Apex program, Captain," he said, his voice now filled with a deep, genuine reverence. "On behalf of the United States Air Force, I apologize for the reception. The story of what happened in Simulator 7 spread through the base not like wildfire, but like a shockwave. It traveled through encrypted channels, hushed whispers in maintenance bays, and stunned conversations in the officers' club. The initial reports were so fantastical they were dismissed as rumor. A pilot who had scored 2 kills while on a flat spin, a dead stick landing on a carrier in a typhoon. It sounded like something out of a comic book. But then the tactical recording, the raw data from the simulation, began to leak. Shared on secure drives and passed from pilot to pilot like contraband, the legend of the Ghost Run was born. It became the most watched piece of footage on the base. Senior instructors gathered in darkened rooms to analyze it, their faces a mixture of disbelief and professional awe. They deconstructed her maneuvers frame by frame, trying to comprehend the level of skill and instinct required to do what she had done. She didn't fly the F-35, one veteran instructor was heard to say. She flew the physics engine itself. Colonel Madsen became a ghost in his own right. Stripped of his command of the Apex program and reassigned to a dreary administrative post, he was a walking monument to humbled arrogance. He was seen in the evenings, sitting alone at a corner table in the club, not drinking, but watching the Ghost Run on a tablet over and over. He wasn't looking for flaws. He was studying it like a religious text, his expression no longer angry or bitter, but deeply, profoundly contemplative. He was a man forced to re-examine the very foundations of his identity. The cultural shift on the base was palpable. The swagger and loud confidence that had once been the currency of respect were now viewed with suspicion. A new, unspoken rule began to take hold. The quieter someone was, the more you should probably listen to them. Young pilots, especially young female pilots who had grown accustomed to the gauntlet of casual condescension, found themselves being treated with a new level of professional respect. The question was no longer, can you handle it? But what can you teach us? One evening, a group of senior pilots were holding court, loudly critiquing a junior aviator's performance. Madsen, who happened to be nearby, walked over. The old Madsen would have joined in, his voice the loudest. The new Madsen stood quietly until they were finished. Then, in a voice stripped of all its former bluster, he said, "Let me tell you a story about a pilot named Rostova. Let me tell you about the cost of making assumptions." He then walked away, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. He was not just humbled. He was transformed, a convert to the church of quiet competence. Eva, the catalyst for all this change, remained utterly unaffected by her newfound fame. She deflected every attempt at praise with simple, technical explanations. When asked by a group of awestruck young pilots how she remained so calm, she simply replied, "Panic is a failure of imagination. If you can imagine every possible outcome, you can prepare for it. If you are prepared, there is no need for panic." She was asked to lead a special seminar, not on advanced combat tactics, but on catastrophic systems failure management and high-stress cognitive processing. The largest auditorium on the base was booked. On the day of the presentation, it was filled to overflowing. Pilots, controllers, engineers, and even General Thorne himself stood in the back, listening with rapt attention. Her presentation was as clean and efficient as her flying. It was devoid of ego, a masterclass in pure, unadulterated competence. She broke down the Ghost Run not as an act of singular heroism, but as a series of logical decisions made under pressure, a cascade of probabilities she had simply navigated more efficiently than the simulation's AI. This explanation, in its profound humility, only served to deepen the myth surrounding her. She made the impossible sound logical, which was perhaps the most impressive feat of all. A few weeks later, a small, unofficially engraved brass plaque appeared on the hatch of Simulator 7. It was put there overnight by the simulator maintenance crew, then listed men and women who had watched the drama unfold from their own consoles. The plaque had just 3 words on it. The Ghost's Office Base Command never officially acknowledged it, but they never ordered it removed either. It became a landmark, a point of pilgrimage for new pilots, a quiet, metallic testament to the day a librarian came to the Apex Predator course and reminded everyone what a true warrior looked like. A year passed. The ripple effects of Eva's single day in the simulator had become a permanent current in the culture of the base. The Apex Predator curriculum was fundamentally rewritten. The old emphasis on aggressive, brute force tactics was replaced by a new focus on creative problem-solving and adaptability. The Ghost Run was now the final, non-mandatory challenge of the course, a brutal, unforgiving gauntlet that served as the ultimate test of a pilot's skill. No one had ever successfully completed it, but the attempt itself had become a badge of honor, a sign that a pilot was willing to push beyond the limits of conventional thinking. Arrogance was now seen for what it was, a strategic liability. The new mantra, filtering down directly from General Thorne's office and repeated in every briefing room, was "Competence is quiet. Results are loud." Colonel Madsen, in a surprising turn, had found a new and profound sense of purpose. He was now the lead instructor for the introductory flight program, the first officer that new pilots encountered. He had requested the post himself. His primary teaching tool was the story of his own failure. He used the recording of his demeaning briefing, followed by the recording of the Ghost Run, as his opening lesson. "I was wrong," he would tell the wide-eyed recruits. "I valued the appearance of strength over the reality of it. Do not make my mistake. Judge the pilots next to you by only one metric, the quality of their work. Everything else is noise." He had become the institution's most fervent guardian against the very prejudice he once embodied. His humility became, in its own way, as legendary as Eva's skill. The legacy of Captain Rostova was not etched onto a monument or listed in a public citation. Her greatest achievements remained locked behind layers of classification, her name unknown to the public she served. Her true legacy was in the changed minds of the thousands of men and women who heard her story. It was in the quiet confidence she instilled in every quiet professional who had ever been underestimated. It was a legacy written not in ink, but in action, a ripple effect of earned respect that was still spreading, silently and powerfully, through the ranks. Her single act of quiet, undeniable competence had done more to reform the institution's most stubborn prejudices than a dozen committees or official directives ever could have. It had become a moral touchstone, a modern fable taught to every new generation of aviators. The story of Captain Eva Rostova, the quiet librarian who flew like a ghost, became a permanent part of the Air Force's institutional folklore. She herself had moved on, assigned to another, even more secretive project, her work forever hidden but forever essential to the nation's defense. Her name was now a symbol, a shorthand for a profound truth, that the most dangerous weapon in any arsenal is a quiet mind, and that respect is a fortress that can only be built with the bricks of demonstrated competence. Her silence had been a statement, her actions a declaration. She had proven that true strength doesn't need to announce its presence. It simply is. The world is full of loud voices demanding respect they have not earned. It is the quiet ones, the professionals who focus on their craft, who master their skills in the silence of discipline, who ultimately shape the future. They do not seek the spotlight, for they know that true validation comes not from the applause of the crowd, but from the quiet satisfaction of a job done to the highest possible standard. They are the foundation upon which excellence is built, the silent guardians of competence in a world enamored with noise. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud arrogance, and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.